miniature soldiers, big opinions. This is the Conclave Podcast. Hi and welcome to another episode of the Conclave, a Warhammer 40k podcast. Tonight you've got me, Adam, the legal department. I'm joined by Ed, the Sandman himself. Say hi, Ed.
Hello.
And, most intriguingly, the not-so-silent king of contrast, the man himself, Warhipster, Josh, everyone. Josh, say hi.
Hi, Josh.
Very good. We're now stealing jokes from Winters, as well as just playing with people who know him. So, tonight we are going to be covering the other big release of the weekend alongside the Space Marines from our previous episode. The Necrons, everyone's favourite crotchety old skeletons / nightmarish horrors from the ancient past. But before we get onto that, just to say a little bit about Josh, who's joining us for the first time. So as I mentioned there, Josh is Warhipster. You may have encountered him already, and as I mentioned, online, on YouTube, on Instagram, and as I mentioned, he is definitely the king of contrast paints. Josh produces tutorials and guides, and also does commission work, and works, would you say almost exclusively, Josh, in the medium of contrast paints?
Almost exclusively, yeah. So I've actually, a friend of mine and I came up with my own branded style. We call it Contrast Plus. I effectively use contrast for pretty much everything, unless it's highlights or metallics. That's it. It's just because for me there's so much power within contrast that actually I could have thrown out the 90-something layer and base paints that I had, but I might as well have done, because I actually counted it the other day. I had, so you know when the contrast paints came out, they basically re-released all the Forge World paints as well, but a Citadel one, so like Sons of Horus Green and things like that. I had nearly every single... The only one I was missing was Oghren Camo before that range came out. And I was like, I'm never going to need to use any of these. And there are pots that have literally not been opened in a year. In fact, I went to look at my Macragge Blue the other day and I was like, oh, God, what happened to you?
just slowly withered in the pot.
Yeah.
And I mean, just we're not just saying this because Josh is our friend, as well as a member of the team behind the Conclave podcast. But if you do want to learn how to paint some absolutely bloody beautiful miniatures with contrast paints and just make them look fantastic, seriously, check out Warhipster on YouTube and Instagram. I believe you've got a tutorial coming out shortly on vehicles. Josh.
Certainly have, yeah. So so yesterday, when's this podcast going live?
This will be going live, I should imagine, Thursday or Friday this week.
Thursday or Friday this week. All right, so let's pretend that it's going live on Thursday. So, Adam, yes, 2 days ago, I spent most of my evening in the garage finishing off a Razorback painted almost exclusively with contrast paints. Again, excluding the metallics and some of the highlights. So all of the armor has been done with contrast, and my secret recipe for fixing streaks and blobs, which you can see, it's not really so much of a secret because I already put it in a tutorial in my How to Paint Blood Angels Outriders tutorial. You can basically see the entire tutorial already by watching that video. But if this goes live today, which I'm pretending is Thursday, if it goes live when Adam just said it would, you'll be able to go and watch the How to Paint a Razorback tutorial right now at 7:30 on Thursday.
Oh, there we go. Something to, I would say, look forward to. But then this will probably end up going out after you've put the video up, because you're very diligent about these things. So yeah, go and watch it. Basically, is the message. And leaving aside all the Space Marine nonsense, much as we love Outriders, much as we love Razorbacks, you have also obviously done tutorials on how to paint all the Necrons from the Indomitus box, which is why you are with us tonight, as well as your general background expertise in the hobby and in Warhammer 40k.
Yeah, no, so I actually at the time of recording, I think I've got five Necron tutorials out from Indomitus. There's 10 in total, out of 19 videos in that box. So there's another 5 still to come. I actually today just finished off editing the Scorpec Lord, which is exciting. So that'll be coming out very soon. And breaking news, not that it's much of a secret, the Silent King will be getting a tutorial probably next week. So
wow, there we go. Something to look forward to. And I think we might mention the Silent King throughout this podcast, but maybe he won't come up. Who knows? but anyway, so to just say why we're here this evening is to talk about the Necrons. They've had the big Codex release over the weekend, or pre-order, I should say. It's gone on pre-order and it will be available from the coming Saturday to be in our hands. And I think, like Space Marines, everyone is very excited about it. Necron players, obviously, especially. It was one of the weaker, if not the weakest army, I think, in 8th edition. And the Codex, by all accounts, gives it some real new and really interesting ways to play the army. And it's nice to see, again, the Necrons getting some love, given they were perhaps a little bit hard done by throughout the sort of the latter end of 8th, and I think some people would probably argue they were pretty hard done by for most of 8th edition as well. And talking about the Necrons, you guys know the Obelisk, which was obviously quite a cool model for their range, was actually voted, I think, by the community the worst model in the game in terms of its rules. So it's quite a cool looking model, but unfortunately voted worst in the game in terms of its rules. So the Necrons, it's really nice to see them get a new shiny codex with lots of new stuff. So I guess let's start talking about it. So how do you feel about the new codex in general, overall? What are your sort of key thoughts? Sandman, Ed, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, I really, really like it. I think that it gives a really positive start to kind of the codexes, and makes me feel like GW is really looking at each individual army specifically. We saw 2 really big changes to both armies, and they were kind of in different ways. So I think I'm really, really excited for the rest of the codexes.
Nice. And Josh, how about yourself?
yeah, I think I would just echo what Ed said. I mean, it's always nice to get new codexes. That's always a treat, I think, for everyone, not just Necron players. Just because I think we touched on this when we were talking earlier. The opportunities for advancing storylines is immense, particularly with what we saw at the end of 8th edition with the Psychic Awakening. So I'm always happy when a new codex comes out, which I think puts me in the smaller percentage of Warhammer fans. Because there are a lot of us out there who, when a new codex comes out, believe the sky is falling. Which, like, it's that whole, when the codex drops, it means that your codex is now bad. I've never understood that kind of attitude, but I'm just excited. I think it's really positive. And I think it's really positive that the Necrons are being effectively teed up as the biggest threat in the galaxy. Which means in about a year's time, their book will be one of the worst again.
They've taken the place of the tower there, so it's really interesting for me.
Yeah, no, let's let Ed pretend that the tower is the biggest threat in the universe. It makes him very happy, and to be honest, it's harmless, much like the tower. So it's fine.
I mean, I'm just going off of last year. Not last year. Good lord, it was 3 years ago, wasn't it? 8th edition. So when 8th edition dropped, Death Guard were in the box, and Death Guard were one of the first codexes because it was like Chaos is the big bad threat after the fall of Cadia. So it turned out that they weren't on the tabletop, but hindsight's 2020.
Well, the Death Guard, and I've as I mentioned before, I've got many armies. Death Guard are one of them, and I think in a future episode we will be talking about the smelliest of the legions, and they are back in a big way too. But to bring it back to Necrons, obviously as the subject we're supposed to be talking about, I mean, to give my sort of 2 cents on this, completely echo what you guys have said. I think the change they've made to the army whilst keeping it thematic from a rules perspective is great, and seeing some of the elements of the Necron lore, and I think we'll probably touch on this a little bit later in more detail, but the idea of sort of the hierarchy and the dynasties and the overlords, the lords, this sort of nobility that exists in Necron society actually having a sort of reflection in the rules on the tabletop, that's really cool. And actually as a as you said, Josh, as an indicator of where things are going, that's really interesting as well in terms of moving the lore forward and integrating it into the rules. So I think it's really cool overall, and it's actually just a really all-round interesting book with lots of interesting plays, I think. Anyway, I mean, we'll see once we get our hands on it properly, but based on what I've seen, it looks like it's the total package. So,
seeing as you're the legal department, Adam, should everything we be saying about the Codex carry the word allegedly?
No, I think we're good on that front, because look, the Codex is obviously there, as we said before, they're on pre-order at the moment. Most people will be getting them getting them next weekend, I guess. But as I said in the Space Marine Codex, what we're saying, in the Space Marine Codex episode, I should say, what we're saying here is based on what we've read from people in the community who've put out videos on this. I mean, we'll mention him because Ed and I are fully paid up members of the Sweater Vest Appreciation Society, but Brian Pullen and obviously also Adrian, who run Tabletop Titans, which if you've not
Bridger.
seen them, and Bridger as well. Bridger, I feel bad. I've left him out. He's behind the camera and he's sort of running the show while Adrian and Brian play. But if you've not seen them, any listeners who've not seen them, check them out on YouTube. Tabletop Titans. They've got a fantastic in-depth review of the Necron Codex and the Space Marine Codex as well, and they've got some. They've got a battle report. Goonhammer is another great source for this sort of thing. Hopefully, once we've played a few games with the armies, we'll be able to give you I don't want to say more informed opinion, but an opinion reflective of how they are on the tabletop. Because obviously, as I said last time with the Space Marine episode, we are not yet famous enough to have GW send us stuff in advance and get to play test it. But you know what, dear listeners, with your help, maybe we can get there. That's the dream.
You do raise a really good point, Josh, because one of my favorite things about one of my favorite things about the Tabletop Titans YouTube video was when they went through the rules for the battle report. They were still for those of you that haven't watched them, they can record their videos live, and they were still being corrected on rules that hadn't been released yet. And there was a fantastic moment where Bridger just goes, "I don't approve of how you guys know this, but thank you anyway."
Yeah. Well, they were sort of saying that. They were like, "How do they know this? How do they know this?" But we are post reviews, so the reviews are out there. You can have a look at them, and you can get an idea of what the book does. So, on that theme of what the book does or contains, as far as we know. Allegedly, to keep Josh happy.
Allegedly, come on, we haven't seen anything.
What is your favorite, least favorite thing that you have seen talked about in terms of what's actually in the book itself? So, do you know what, Josh? Let's put you on the spot. Let's kick off with you. Favorite and least favorite.
Okay. So actually, you reminded me at the beginning about how the kind of layers of Necron society are being showed off on the tabletop. I think this is possibly one of the healthiest things for the game, to kind of stop spamming of certain HQ characters. And I'm coming at this as a Blood Angels player. Now, I'd just like to clarify to everybody out there, whilst I did build 3 Smash Captains, I think I only ever used 2 twice, and that's because it goes against my, my morals, my moral code, to play more than one captain in a Space Marine army. So from a Necron's point of view, you absolutely shouldn't be having more than one overlord, because Necrons famously, for a long time, that might be changing now with Zarek, but they generally don't agree with each other on if pretty much anything. So to have two overlords, and especially when an overlord is supposed to be like, the leader of a dynasty, or whatever. It's not like Space Marine captain or a company commander, or what are they called? A commander in Tau, Ed? What are they called? A Chasso?
Yeah, Chasso. Yeah.
Chief
Yeah,
Fishman.
it's not. Yeah, Chief Fishman, or it's not like that where traditionally they have they command a phalanx. Like Necrons, my understanding, I could be wrong, but if you're an overlord, you pretty much rule a tomb world. So why would there be two of them? So I think my favorite thing about this is being able to go, you can only have, I don't know specifically what the rules, and this is all allegedly, but that you can have one overlord, and if you have an overlord, he has to be he has to be your warlord or something, doesn't it? Or and then you can have is it noble underneath it or something?
Yeah, so the way it works, they have the system called allegedly the way it works is they have the system called the Royal Court, and basically the command structure. So if you have an overlord, he is your warlord. If you don't have an overlord, it sort of spills down to a lord. And then from there, I think to sort of the Royal Warden level, and you have to go a long way down. So to this point about the game, one of the classic builds that people used to do in 8th was running a Cryptek as a warlord. And for anyone that doesn't know, a Cryptek is supposed to be this kind of class of technologists, but obviously with Necrons, their technology is so advanced and so out there that it's akin to magic. So I mean, I like calling them sort of skeletal space wizards, because that's almost what they are. But they are definitely the sort of technology class of the Necron society, and they are described in the lore as being outside of all of this kind of dynastic politics that Josh is talking about there, with them not getting on. So they kind of move around. They're a bit like mercenaries. They'll go and sort of work for overlords and do things for them and then sort of move on. But people always used to take those as warlords, and actually it's now quite difficult to do that, because if you just include others in your army that are above them in the chain, they have to be the warlord. Which again, to your point, is really flavourful. And obviously, to the elephant in the room that I said we might talk about a little bit, but if you bring Zarek, the Silent King himself, he has to be your warlord, because unsurprisingly, the Necron equivalent of the Emperor has to be in charge of everything.
Yeah, I mean, so this bothers me about a lot of the time about 8th edition. It was, not that many people were doing this, but if you took, you never had to have Gilliman as your warlord. So you could take Gilliman, and then you could make a servitor your warlord if you wanted to, just because you didn't want it to give up an easy warlord kill. So I fully support this as a direction for the game, and it's encouraging to see it, because it's in both books, isn't it? The Space Marine one says if you have to have a captain. Yeah. So I think this is really encouraging. So that's my favourite thing about the Necron book. My least favourite thing is the crazy naming conventions that we're eventually going to end up with. Everything. I've never owned a Necron Codex. I just like to specify that. But everything seems to have now gained not only 1,000 keywords, but also a word in its name. Unless you're a moldy old model from 20 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. I saw the other day, there was just you've got the Canoptek Lord, and then you've got Lord. Let's move past him because he doesn't get a fancy name. Do you know what I mean?
I think you said earlier, like the destroyers, right? We used to just have destroyers and heavy destroyers, and now you have Scorpec destroyers, Ophidian destroyers, and Locust destroyers. And just to say what they are for people who don't know quickly, the Scorpec destroyers are the guys on 3 legs who run around and have big sharp knife blades. The Ophidian destroyers are they look a little bit like wraiths, if people know what that is. So they're just like imagine half a sort of the top half of a skeleton, the torso, with a very long metal spine and big claws. So again, a close combat unit. And the Locust destroyers are the basically, and their Locust heavy destroyers are the updated name for the old sort of floaty gun platform destroyers that you used to have in the 8th edition Codex.
What's a hex mark?
Oh yes, and the hex mark. Yes, of course. I'm forgetting one.
Oh, is that a destroyer?
Yeah.
See,
he's
I'm telling you, these naming conventions are mental.
I really agree. I think it's the inconsistency that bugs me sometimes. So like that's a good example where you have like there they've given every single destroyer a name, but then not all the lords have their own special name. So like the GW just are inconsistent. Like Space Marines are an absolute classic. Like they went with the letter I for everything, and then they just one day went, nah, stuff it. like we'll go back to just calling things random stuff.
Do you think
and lots of people pronounce that wrong as well.
Yeah.
Do you think somebody at GWHQ misspelled Eradicator with an I, and they were like, yeah, that's good. We'll go with that for the Space Marines.
I mean, I come at this from as you said, I make YouTube tutorials, and I like to try and say it properly. But what was the one I saw? Is it Nemesaur Zandrek? I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah,
I know he's been around a while,
Zandrek,
but I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to pronounce half of these things. What was it? What I was like, I mean, in one of my tutorials, I literally tripped over the word canoptech. I nearly did it then. Canoptech. Like 15 times because I was trying to say the name of the paint, Canoptech alloy, and now every time when you hear me do it in a tutorial after that, I'm like, and now we're going to be using Canoptech because I don't want to trip over that one again.
You just, what you need to do is you just need to pre-record yourself saying all these words and then just really badly dub it in. So on your video, your lips move and it just goes, today I'm going to be using Canoptech alloy.
Or I get Microsoft Sam.
Yeah, just text to speech.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. No, I mean, do you know what? I think that's really interesting, and actually the perspective you sort of bring to it as someone who's a creator and does all this work on YouTube, around, just as you say, the naming conventions, and they can get a bit silly. And I think from a gaming perspective, having to remember all the individual names of all your individual bits and bobs and what you've given them, while maybe quite fun from a lore perspective that it's nice everything's named, it can get a bit silly, but I guess it's the pursuit of copyright, right? It's where it comes
That's
from.
true.
Let's be honest.
I mean, what is it?
About it.
I mean, this is the thing, right? So we've got, what is it? We're talking about the lords, weren't we? Just a second ago. We've got the Locust Lord, we've got the Scorpec Lord, we've got Lord, not with an E, unfortunately, because that would be amazing. Catacomb Command Barge, which carries a lord, and the Overlord.
Yeah, do you know what?
It's a whole lot.
The funniest thing, actually, just on the Scorpec Lord, right? And this is again, I think, to the point about inconsistency. Is the Scorpec Lord, despite being a lord, he doesn't have the noble keyword, so he doesn't do the things that the nobles actually do normally in the Codex. So he doesn't.
But hasn't he?
Buffs.
Well, hasn't he lost his mind? Isn't that the point? He's a destroyer lord, and they've lost their mind.
Yeah. I guess that's the again and maybe it's good because it's bringing the lore in. But I think if you look at the old destroyer lord, at least as I understand it, he could do sort of in terms of like taking relics and being a warlord and stuff. He could do all of that, so you just would have thought it would have been a consistency to make them still be a noble and do something, even if it's only for, destroyer units or something.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I think that's also just one of the kind of subtle, fluffy changes that you'll see in most of these books. Like, I hope that in the Blood Angels book, you cannot give your warlord the Death Company keyword. because that's crazy.
Or you must throw away the model.
Or or you must grind it into paste using your miniature case. But like, this is the point. The point I'm making is that if even if it's a HQ unit, if in a fluff way it's incapable of issuing commands and orders because of what it's doing, from a fluff perspective, I think that should be reflected in some way in the tabletop. So like, if a Scorpec Lord doesn't have the Nobel keyword, for me, the Nobel keyword.
He's won a prize. They've given him a prize. It's not for peace, unfortunately.
Or it's that everybody else has got a Nobel prize and he's the only one who's not. No, if he hasn't got the Nobel keyword, I'm hoping that is for a fluff reason, because he shouldn't be noble because he's lost his mind and he's part of the Destroyer cult. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
so
cool.
No.
it's just subtle things that I think is potential. I'm hoping that this is all in the book, allegedly.
I was going to say, I should point out to the listeners as well that obviously, in case it wasn't blaringly obvious, Josh is a massive Blood Angels player. So we will obviously, Josh will be on when the Blood Angels book comes out, and maybe even before, but even when we're in the realm of the alleged rather than the real. Josh will definitely get an hour's episode just talking about all the cool changes to Blood Angels.
I take offence with being called a massive Blood Angels player. I'll have you know, I've lost 6 pounds in the last few weeks.
You've done very well in lockdown. Is that from having to paint up loads and loads of Sandguard, or is that just this sort of sheer the force of having to put all that contrast on, or?
No, that's because I actually eat properly whilst I live at my parents' house.
It's always good, because this is the thing about this podcast. We talk about Warhammer, but you also get health tips. So eat properly is one of them. It's fairly basic, but we'll go with that.
Yeah. Just do as I do, kids.
Our next one will be on Tyranids and intermittent fasting.
And then after that, World Eaters and mindfulness.
So to bring it back to the Necrons, I have to rope you guys back in. So to bring it back to the Necrons, Ed, least favourite thing in the Codex?
Yeah, I mean, probably my favourite thing is the same as Josh's. Where there are really good nods to the fluff that hit the game, and but I think from just a rules point of view, I actually really like reanimation protocols. Now, I think it's a really good rule, especially when it's combined with living metal. So obviously the big loss for reanimation protocols is that it's really hard to resurrect those kind of multi-model units. But being honest, if without writing any rules, if I was to ask GW what they want reanimation protocols to do, or they asked me, I should say, I would say that I would want it to resurrect a couple of big models a game and quite a lot of Necron warriors, but not all of them. And to be fair, that is pretty much how the rule will play. Again, this is all allegedly, and I have not played the army, so I think it's really good so far, and especially things like living metal as well. That's something that, whilst there's a lot of complexities with the Necron rules now, which I love, things like living metal being on everything make it a lot easier to play. So yeah, that's probably my favourite change to the game, is actually reanimation protocols. My least favourite change to the game, one, I had a problem, as I remember ranting to you about this, Adam, after the Necron book drops, because I was like, I don't understand why they released the rules for Necrodermis the way they did, because releasing the rules for the Catan as, oh, by the way, the Catan can only take 3 wounds a turn, and they heal as well, was like everybody lost their minds, because not mentioning the fact that they don't get Lookout Sir was just a teeny piece of information there that everybody needed. That makes the world of difference. The fact that you can, oh, by the way, shoot them. But Katana are just awesome, and I love that. But really, I think the one thing, and whilst, as I said, there's a lot of really great precedents that they're setting with this book. There's a couple of precedents that we've seen with the Necrons book and the Space Marine book where are a little bit worrying to me. So GW identify rules that are too powerful, And so the one I'm talking about here is Vect. Vect is an incredibly powerful ability. It's been nerfed massively in 9th edition, and they actually reduced it throughout 8th edition also. And now they've gone, oh, Zandrek, you can just do that for free, and that Zandrek will win you games based on that. So
for those of us who... Sorry, yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say, just for those of us who haven't played a game since lockdown began, and for those new listeners who haven't played a game of Warhammer 40,000 and don't know who Vect is, Ed, do you want to tell us a little bit about what that ability does?
Well, kids, gather around the fireplace. So Vect
Some fine hosting there, Josh.
Vect is an ability allows you to stop someone else's stratagem. That's what it does, and that's really, really, really key because there are some stratagems that at present have been built into the rules that they are so necessary for going off that you will really, really struggle. And even things like just denying a key reroll at times has a massive difference. And the amazing, and I say this as a Genius Protocol player as well because we have access to the same thing. The amazing thing about that ability is that you actually don't need to use it very much. Because this is what happens when you play against an army that has that ability. You just don't play that strategy, because you can't use a strategy that you know your opponent can nerf. So your opponent actually doesn't even have to use it, and then they can use it someplace else. So it's an incredibly powerful ability. And if you've played against Cabal the Blackheart or Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, you'll know that dominates a huge part of the game. And it's really concerning that they've now got a really reliable version of it that I suspect you're going to see him a lot. Imatech is also very, very good, so I suspect you'll keep seeing is it Sautek, I think it is. So and Sautek's also quite
Sautek,
good. I mean that is, and I will say, I appreciate I've just ranted there for a little while, but I will say that is a very small gripe in what is a very large, amazing book in my opinion.
Yeah, cool, agreed. And I think it's interesting actually that you go on the Vect thing, because that is very much like as you say, a tactical sort of much more like a game of poker or game of chess element to the game, and it is a bit odd that they, again, having recognised it's so powerful, have just given it to them. But there's trade-offs there. To take Zandrek, you say you have to run the Sautek dynasty, which people may not want to do. So I think it'll be interesting once games get going, to just see how often that gets used. And do you know what? It's interesting that you pick up on that, because I actually didn't see, in terms of the reviews that I've read of the Necron Codex, I didn't see too many people pick up on the on the sort of Zandrek Vect rule to quite the same extent. So it is interesting that you've picked that out, and I think it's a really good point. So on my, I guess, my favourite thing in the Codex, I really love what they've done. You've mentioned it a little bit already with the Catan, because they're just so cool. I mean, these are like, in the lore, if people don't know, the Catan are the star gods. They're these kind of entities who are made of sort of energy, and they feast on stars. And long ago in the distant past, they sort of came to the Necrons when the Necrons were flesh and blood and were sort of in a feud with the race called the Old Ones, who are the sort of the background ancient race of the whole Warhammer 40k universe, and they created the Eldar and the original Orcs and various others. And they were the ones, the Catan were the ones who sort of said to the Necrons, well, we're going to help you in your war against the Old Ones, which they were losing, by sort of giving you the ability to become effectively immortal. And the way that this happened was they were turned into the soulless mechanical, or I say mechanical, I mean it's a level of technology that's akin to magic in some ways, but these sort of metallic skeletons made of living metal, and in the process the Catan sort of feasted on the souls of the Necrons. And long story short, eventually the Necrons turned on them, smashed them to bits using the almighty power of their weaponry, quite literally breaking them into pieces and imprisoning them in various bodies and sort of containment systems that they had made, but they can still use them on the battlefield in the lore when things are really dire. So to reflect that, GW and the new Codex have made them just insanely powerful, but they're also incredibly expensive. They're about 350 points a model. I think the Deceiver, who's one of the big ones, is a little bit cheaper. But they have some absolutely crazy abilities, and I think you're going to see people taking them a lot more, because in 8th, they were good, but nowhere near as good as they needed to be to make up their points cost. They have these abilities that are a little bit like psychic powers, to just deal out mortal wounds, but they just weren't very good in 8th. And in 9th now, they're just very, very good, which I keep saying a lot, but they really are. So to give you an example of this, the Nightbringer, who is I think you're going to see a lot of, who's this kind of big dude who looks a lot like the sort of the avatar of death, which is
Fighter of the Daybringer.
Yeah, he's the fighter of the Daybringer.
Master of the Moon.
He's friendship and mortal wounds for you and me. I don't know. So he sorry for anyone who's not seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's going to sound really odd. So he is a but we're going to leave it in the show. So he's this kind of big floating avatar of death. I mean, he has a scythe and he looks like the Grim Reaper. And he has some really cool abilities in the new Codex. So one of them, he has this thing called Gaze of Death, which not the most creative naming, although then maybe that will keep Josh happy. But what that does is you pick a unit within 9 inches, you roll 3d6, and on every roll of a 4-up, you dole out D3 mortal wounds. Which, for anyone, people who are new to the game, mortal wounds are generally very, very good, and there's very few abilities that can really stop them. And even for armies that have a lot of very high toughness models that have very good saves and invulnerable saves, their weaknesses are, so Custodes are a good example, the Adeptus Custodes.
They're never a good example for anything. Never ever mention them in my presence again.
Okay. I won't mention the Golden Boys ever again. But the point is, for those sorts of armies, mortal wounds are their kryptonite. So that ability to dole them out is very good. The other thing he does is in combat, he can do an attack that's sort of like strength 14. It's got some ludicrous minus on it to someone's armor save, and you can't take invulnerable saves against it. And it also ignores abilities that reduce damage. So Feel No Pains. If anyone's familiar with Gazgul, the Prophet of the War, the Orc, who got an amazing new model pretty recently, actually. See Warhipster for a tutorial on how to do him.
Excellent plug of my content. Thank you.
all about the plugs. But yeah, so he has an ability where he can only take a certain number of wounds a turn, and reduces damage, and basically the Nightbringer just ignores all of that. He just turns that off, which is interesting because obviously, as Ed says, the Catan also have a similar ability themselves, so they can only take 3 wounds in any phase. So basically, this thing is a real beat stick, and if you want to kill it, you're going to have to work very hard to do so, because it's going to probably take you a couple of turns. And also, again, they have living metal, so they are actually healing a wound each turn as well. So essentially, they're just very powerful. And I think it's going to be, and I'm not just saying that from this is really powerful, I want to run it in my army kind of power gaming perspective. It just seems really cool. yeah, I'll run, mate. I'll run 3. No, I'm kidding. It's one per detachment anyway. But
yep. So Adam will take 3 detachments with 3 Catan and some scarabs, and that'll be it.
Well, you know what? If it's a legal list, it's a legal list. No, I'm kidding. But
rules
they are
as written.
yeah. But hey, they call me the legal department, right? No, but they are. I have seen people talking about doing some like ludicrous monster mash list, a bit like the one we're all sort of taking the mickey out of, which I just think will be quite funny to see if someone tries to do that. But realistically, I just think you're just going to see one of these things in each army, or in a lot of armies on the tabletop, and they are just very cool at what they do. And it's nice to see something that's described as a star god in the lore. I mean, let's be fair, star gods aren't exactly commonplace knocking around even in the 40k universe, and it's nice to see them get something that recognizes how powerful they're meant to be. And again, thinking about the future, I think it's a good sign for something like, say, like the Avatar of Cain, which is an Eldar model, which is supposed to be this like, living metal avatar of their god of war. And he's got the model from, there's a Forge World model of it, which is really cool. The normal model, not so much, mainly because it's very old, like a lot of the Eldar range. But he's supposed to be really powerful, and at the moment he's rubbish.
Yeah, I think the other thing that it does for me is it really just sets the framework for just how powerful Zarek is in the fluff and in the game, and it just makes me so incredibly excited for Kato Sicarius to beat the crap out of him when inevitable, because Xenos characters generally don't do too well. So yeah, when that happens, Kato Sicarius is going to look bloody incredible.
That's the thing I'm looking forward to about in the book, because what the book will do, in theory, is like most codexes, is it will go, Zarek returned and he wrecked face, and all this stuff happened, and then one noble warrior stood up and beat him in a duel, nearly died himself in the process, and now there is an enormous stalemate in that sector of the galaxy. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing who that is. I thought
it was going to be Dante, because we have the short story where Dante meets Zarek, and there's the thing where, so for those of you who aren't familiar, Zarek actually has a mask of Sanguinius, and the Blood Angels get absolutely outraged by this, obviously at first, and the Tyranids then turn up, which is a problem. But yeah, I thought they were going to set up Dante, but it doesn't look like it, does it?
Was that Zarek, or was that a different dynasty?
I thought it was Zarek. I thought it was him himself.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was the Silent King. I think it's somebody else. I don't know, though. I haven't read the story.
I feel like it's Zarek. I'll double check.
I mean, either way, the Blood Angels were angry, so I mean that's no change from the norm, right?
They did have, during the devastation of Baal in the prelude up to it, it's the kind of the next system over. There was a sort of temporary alliance between our Necron faction and the Blood Angels in order to stem the tide of nonsense that was coming. It didn't work, and all the Necrons died, which is why I question whether or not it was Zarek. But it might have been. I honestly, I don't remember. I've not read it.
Yeah,
so.
it was.
Was it true? It was the Silent King.
Yeah, it was the Gehenna campaign. For those of you who want to look it up. Yeah.
And just to say, we may as well talk about him because he's kind of come up naturally as inevitably he would. Another favourite thing about the Codex, just because the model is so damn cool. I mean, we'll get to his rules in a minute. Zarek is, as we've said, the Silent King. He is the Necron equivalent of basically the Emperor of mankind for all of the Imperium. He's got some really interesting lore. So basically he was the one, I said earlier about the Catan and the imprisoning, sort of the shattering of the star gods and them getting imprisoned. Zarek was the Silent King who led on that, and basically was in charge when all of that happened. And the reason why are you laughing about said led on that like it was a corporate presentation?
You made him sound like Zarek was asked to head up the global the galactic change program.
He came up with the protocols for COVID.
It's been a long day at work, but let's just say Zarek made sure that there were synergistic alliances between all the dynasties, which allowed them to promote efficiency by destroying their star gods who'd betrayed them.
He managed the project designed to make the Catan redundant from their roles.
Exactly.
And he has a glowing LinkedIn now. It's
incredible.
So he
is the highest rated Excel user on the entire of the LinkedIn database.
So he in the lore, so he did all this, and then and the last thing he did was he severed the command protocols, because in the lore, all of the Necrons when they became when the race that came before the Necron tier, to be exact, became the Necrons, the sort of the metal skeleton guys and girls we know today, they were all basically enslaved in that hierarchy that we talked about earlier. So all of them had to do what ultimately the Silent King told them to, and take orders from him. And what he did is he severed those command protocols, and when the Necrons went into their tombs and basically went to sleep for millions of years, because they could see that all the other races in the galaxy at the time were basically too much for them to fight, and they would sort of come back and reclaim their empire another day. He disappeared off into the out of the galaxy, supposedly, and basically the lore for the last few years has been building up this idea here that he's going to return, and obviously, as we say, he's now back. Now his model, I mean, Jesus, it's just awesome. It's such a centerpiece model, and honestly, I cannot wait to see what you do with it, Josh.
I don't know how you would paint that, honestly.
Yeah,
I don't know how you would do it.
I would start with that in the video.
Yeah, that's going to be the opening to your tutorial. I've got no idea what I'm going to do here, but let's just give it a go. No, I mean, if people haven't seen this model, it's for a start, it's huge. It's basically a big floating, I don't know what the right word is, dais or throne of some kind.
Go with dais. That's a great word.
Dais. It's a good word, isn't it, dais? And it's got, one of these Catan, one of these star gods is basically imprisoned on it, like a battery, just powering the thing. And he's also got these two other Necron overlords with him, because one, well, I was going to call them Statler and Waldorf, because they do look a bit like the two puppets from the Muppets, the two old guys who are always like complaining.
Yeah, no,
about
I get
things.
what you mean. Yeah, fair play.
Because they're like either side of him, just like sat there. One's called the Pharaon of the Blades, and the other one is the Pharaon of the, I want to say Stars, but I don't know if that's right. And I
don't know why, but like,
it's amazing.
I referred to them the other day, and it just popped into my head. It felt so natural. I was talking to the thing, and I was like, so you've got Zarek there, and then you've got Rosencrantz and Guildenstern on either side. And then they just looked at me like, who are you? And I was like, oh, come on.
That's
like
good. I like that.
Shakespearean reference.
I like it. But yeah, so they're sort of either side of him. He's sort of standing in the middle with his big like staff of office, I guess, gesturing quite dramatically out the front of the model, and it's got these two big kind of floating stones with it, these sort of floating monoliths almost, which are called menhirs or menhirs. I don't actually know quite how to. This gets back to Josh's point about not knowing how to bloody pronounce
it. Is menhir, Adam? For God's sake.
Is it menhir? There we go, menhir. It's menhir.
I don't actually know.
we'll go with menhir. And basically, I mean, look, this is a podcast. Go and look at the model yourselves, but it just looks very cool. In terms of rules, it looks cool. There's photos out.
No, we know what that looks like. Like, that one's confirmed. What Adam's about to talk about is the alleged page that he has to himself of rules in the Codex that we don't know and none of us have ever seen, and therefore we couldn't possibly comment, but we could make some very well-educated guesses.
Yeah, I'm gonna make some serious assumptions here, but my understanding is that he has one of the biggest data sheets of any model, any individual model in Warhammer 40k, and he's just got an absolute ton of abilities and loads of wounds. He's very difficult to damage and to hurt, and you can just see this thing turning up at tournaments and just looking absolute, well, assuming people do a good paint job on it. So again, see Warhipster to learn how to do it properly when eventually the tutorial
Mate, can
appears.
you stop plugging Josh, please?
Allegedly, I might do a terrible job of it. You don't know. It might be the first time.
But yeah, it just looks very cool. And yeah, can't wait to see it on the tabletop.
Yeah, it's it is mahoosive. In terms of presence and rules, it's an AOS thing, isn't it? Really, to have these kind of real tabletop pieces. I do wonder how many they'll get. Yeah, because Josh is a big AOS fan as well, aren't you, Josh?
I am very much so. Yeah. It's giving me some serious issues about
AOS fan.
Now I feel objectified by your male gaze. There is very much a thing in Age of Sigmar about bringing in your godlike deity. So even off the top of my head, you've got like Alariel, you've got Teclis, and those are the only. You got Marathi. They are kind of effectively the leader of your faction, and so whilst we technically have had a bit of that in 40k, the power levels are somewhat different because we don't really have god level characters that are active. It's effectively the equivalent of having like Khorne, but like not making an appearance as a model. So or as I think you said, Adam, the Emperor making an appearance in model form, although admittedly in Age of Sigmar we haven't had Sigmar, and I don't think we ever will, because I think that would just be obscene. But yeah, I mean, Guilliman's kind of like the Silent King equivalent. So we've sort of had a bit of it, but who knows what else we're gonna get. I think it's encouraging, because I think, again, with the changes to 9th, how the tables are smaller, we play with more terrain, the games are quicker, damage has gone up, less models on the table, this, that, and the other. I think introducing characters like the Silent King, I think it's brilliant, because, you know, it just means games go even more quicker and they're even more insane. And, you know, I think it reflects where we are in the story as well now. You know, the galaxy has been torn in half.
It's very quiet. Hence the Silent King. He's not got much to do.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you know, it's. I feel like the threats we've had up until now have been mostly containable or stupid, and don't like. Yeah. Anyway,
Yes.
Whereas Zarek feels way more dangerous than like Magnus. Like when Magnus returned, all he wanted to do was, you know, set Fenris on fire, and that was it. And when Mortarion returned, all he wanted to do was
find some
know,
strepsils.
Yeah, and when Guilliman turned up, he just kind of went, all right, let's build some armies, you guys, and go back out and let's re-establish the status quo somewhere else.
And the rest of the Imperium went, why didn't we think of that? Guys, we could just make more space marines. Fuck.
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
To say, if anybody's the power user of XL, it's got to be Guilliman or Word. Like he's the
this is the thing though.
So worker at the Imperium.
But this is where the drama comes from. So Guilliman did endorse the Silent King for his use of XL, but the Silent King didn't endorse Guilliman back. So the Silent King has actually just pipped him, and it's quite the drama.
So
there's some serious LinkedIn beef in the 40k.
There you go, listeners. Tune in every week for more sort of office LinkedIn 40k crossover humour.
Yeah.
I really hope that becomes the theme of this podcast.
Well, we're releasing these on MySpace, right? So I imagine.
Oh god. so look on the alleged, to be clear, rules. Just to say, like, one of the things that is interesting about to your point, Josh, about this kind of, you know, super beat stick character coming in. He's actually the first of the new Supreme Commander category. So if people don't know, when they did the 9th edition rules, one of the things they changed was they created this idea of a Supreme Commander who can basically go in a separate detachment. They don't cost you anything to have, and in fact often they will, well, as I'll say in a second, they can give you extras. So the Silent King, allegedly, is a Supreme Commander, fits into this separate detachment and gives you additional command points. So it's a good kind of interesting indication of where we're going to go.
His command points, essentially. That's where they come. Because the problem is, if he wasn't in there, he would have to be in a super heavy auxiliary. No,
because I don't think he is. I don't think he is a.
He does come with 3 as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So he actually refunds and gives you additional.
Right. Sorry. I thought you meant he got them for being in the Supreme.
No. He doesn't cost you anything, and he gives you extra. So I mean, we might see. You know, we talked about Guilliman as an example, both for his proficiency with various office programs and software, but also we might see him as a Supreme Commander. I just think somebody like in the Tau, maybe Commander Shadow Sun.
I can't wait for that matchup where like I have a Supreme Commander who is Ornvar, and then I go against the Silent King. Like to Josh's point, like there's a bit of a power discrepancy. It's not even Ornvar; it's a hologram.
Isn't he also on like a little floating like dais thing?
Yeah,
he floats around. Oh, there you go. They're not that different. What are you complaining about? See,
and he does have 2
players
dudes. Actually, he does have 2 dudes.
Maybe conspiracy. Maybe Ornvar is actually secretly the Silent King.
Ornvar is dead.
Well, its hologram is the Silent King.
The Silent King versus Castellan Eat Creed. Supreme Commander off. Who will win? It's going to be a very, very easy contest to call.
I tell you what, Adabash, I will have a little gripe on this because this is the Supreme Command. The Supreme Command detachment solves the problem, but the Super Heavy Auxiliary detachment is so. They make it so there's just no point bringing them. So like with Necrons, the Obelisk, for example, the Obelisk is quite good, but the Monolith especially is actually really good, has great rules, but you're just never going to see it because of that rule.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame. So hopefully that gets FAQ'd reasonably quickly. 3CP is just way too much.
Yeah, so if people don't know, the Monolith is another one of these Necron models from the previous edition that it wasn't very good, to be quite frank, and nobody really took them unless it was for a laugh. And it's basically their kind of, I guess, their tank in some ways, their kind of super tank. It's a big floating thing with lots of guns on it, and it also allows you to deploy Necron troops from it because it's supposed to have like a sort of teleportation.
And you get eaten if you go too close.
Yeah, if you go too close, it somehow like eats you into its teleporter and then teleports you somewhere where you'll be dead. I don't know. But the new model they're going to have a new model for it, which they have announced. This is not alleged. And the rules that they've previewed for it, as well as the alleged rules that people have talked about, are, as Ed says, really, really good. It's a really, really powerful model. Until you get to the point that it is what we call a Lord of War, so it has to go into this super heavy detachment, which costs you command points. So yeah, to Ed's point, I'd agree with that. I think look, we all have a little moan about things, and look, maybe
this
on
is
least
why
favourite.
I made the podcast.
yeah. When we were sitting around talking about how we're going to do this, we were like, this is an opportunity for us to moan and inflict it upon you, dear listener.
But conversely to that, I argue, I've argued about this before. Losing command point, you're not losing command points. You're spending command points to bring a monolith.
Yeah, I hope, and I think most of the playtesters have fed it back by this point as well from watching online. So I think it is going to go back, and they will just reduce the CP tax for it. Basically, is what's going to happen.
No, so yeah, no. Look, I think it's a fair point. We do have to see how it goes. We do have to see how it plays. But yeah, I think the only way to know is how it's going to develop over the next. I guess. Well, I mean, as soon as there's more tournaments, but obviously subject to Nurgle's rot that we're all having to deal with at the moment, leaving the planet, and quarantines and lockdowns ending, then maybe we'll see some play, and hell, maybe people will bring monoliths, we'll bring Tesseract Vaults, and that'll be an indication of the way things go. So we'll have to see. So I think. Or let's move on to, I guess, to round things off, much as we did before. I think, guys, if you could give me one thing, if there's one thing out of the alleged details of the Codex or what you've seen that you would really look forward to using, or and it can be like a new model, it can be like a particular rule that we haven't talked about. One thing that you're just really looking forward to giving a go. Even if you don't have a Necron army, if you're going to play a Necron army, what would it be that you want to try? So, Ed, do you want to lead off?
Yeah. So I think. It's a simple thing, but for me, it's the one of the precedents that this book has set. Hopefully, is the reduction drastically in the amount of 3-up invuns. In fact, there are none, I believe, between the two books, and that's obviously race obviously took a big hit there, but I think that's a reasonable price to pay. I honestly hated 3-up invuns for the game. I just thought they were incredibly boring to play against. And I just thought that they took away far more than they brought. and they've really dominated the games, especially because the game is supposed to be played at 1,000 points and 1,500 points, and they become too much there. So I am really happy to see them go. Being honest.
Cool. And Josh, what about you?
I'm really looking forward to using the monolith.
Me too.
Yeah, no, I'm probably going to end up with an enormous Necron army because of YouTube and probably never use it. So I don't really know how to answer that.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll borrow your monolith and play against Ed and try and beat him just to spite you. Just to spite you, spite Ed even.
No,
yes.
I'm very up for that game.
Yeah, we can do that. However, if you lose with my monolith, you have to give me one of your models forever.
Okay. Oh God. All right.
Of my choosing.
Oh, I don't know about that.
That's the rules.
Oh
God. Yeah, go on. Why not?
We should say we pay for pink slips in this group. So everybody always takes away something of someone else's army.
Yeah, that's how we work.
It's like when I suggested to some friends of mine that we play real Warhammer so that whenever a model dies, it dies. And they were like, what does that mean? It's like, well, we all bring a ball peen hammer, and every time I kill one of your models, I get to smash it into 1,000 pieces.
Just picture Harry Potter chess, and that's how I imagine.
Yes, Harry Potter chess that doesn't repair itself.
Yeah.
I now just have this image of somebody like fleeing a tournament, clutching the Silent King, just with you pursuing them with a hammer. Josh.
It's mine, Adam.
You agreed. You agreed.
You knew the rules when you joined. I don't know. So for me, thing I'm most looking forward to. Tough one. Do you know what I want to give the like Canoptech? And this is like a bit of a lame one because it's a bit more prosaic, but the Canoptech Doomstalker, which is the like big walking gun basically that's new in the
half
Codex.
of 40k.
Yeah. I was going to say I'm not getting a very good description there. But if people have seen the Indomitus box, or frankly any of the previews, it was shown in the previews, but the Canoptech sort of Doomstalker and the Reanimator are these kind of very tall, almost like War of the Worlds tripod looking constructs. They've got four legs, so they're not a tripod, but they are these kind of quadruped, these big four-legged constructs, and they just look really cool. And the Doomstalker is basically one of those with a gigantic like death ray on its back, so it looks very, very like very War of the Worlds, and I just love the idea of an army with sort of like three of those sat at the back, slowly sort of walking their way down the board, firing these sort of death rays, a little bit like that, again the scene from the War of the Worlds. Even let's talk about the Tom Cruise movie, where the tripod is walking along the street and it's just sort of destroying everything with these like ray guns. I don't know, I just think that would be like really thematic.
That
kind of funny.
That kit was so unsettling for me to see, because I would have bet money on that and the Reanimator being the same kit when it came out, and then it's not at all. It's way bigger, isn't it?
Yeah. It's quite a bit taller. So yeah, I just don't know. I think that would just be really cool.
I think you should, if you're going to play 3 Canoptech Doomstalkers, every single time you play somebody, you need
9.
to begin the game with the opening monologue from the Jeff Wayne War of the Worlds.
Ooh, yeah.
So and that otherwise you're not playing it properly, and you don't deserve to have that army.
So as you can see, Josh is fun because he imposes quite strict conditions on your playing of Warhammer.
I impose strict conditions on your playing of Warhammer for the sake of fun. We're having fun, aren't we, kids?
Yeah.
Have fun.
I'll get the recording. Don't worry.
I'm sure we'll have fun.
No. I just think it'd be quite fun. I just think it'd be quite a cool way to do it, and they're just very good models. So yeah, a bit more prosaic, but that honestly is what I'm looking forward to taking in terms of sort of the new models. I will say as well, the new Cryptech range. So we mentioned them earlier. These kind of like magic space wizard technologist things. There's now like 4 of them, and again it ties back nicely to Josh's point about crazy names, because you now have a technomancer, a chronomancer, a plasmancer, and a psychomancer is the 4th one. Yeah, I've got those right. And they all do slightly different cool things, and the models for them are they're just beautiful. Again, can't wait to see what you do with them, Josh. There's the third plug of the evening.
This is the most expensive podcast I've ever been on. Because apparently I'm doing everything.
Yeah, you're doing all of them, mate. You're doing the whole range.
I'd just like to make an appeal to the listeners. I am currently looking for someone to bankroll a small business. It's a manufacturer, and we'll talk about it afterwards. I'll ask Adam to put the advert in post.
Yeah, we'll get you a proper. We'll get you. You know what we'll do? We won't do an advert. We'll do like a sort of a Bob Geldof style appeal. You know, for just £3, you can help Josh to produce the finest quality contrast on the Necron range.
Every time I click my fingers, Josh has to do another model on his list of tutorials to do.
Yeah, we'll get an appeal. We'll get an appeal going. But in all seriousness, no, the models are really cool. And yeah, I just think they're going to be quite fun to use on the tabletop. Although I think some people have been a bit more sanguine about whether they're actually any good. But you know what? If it's a floating space wizard that can like holographically project a skull, which is what the Psychomancer model is doing, I'm down for that any day. That sounds really cool. So I think we're coming to time. So unless you guys have got anything else you want to sort of finish off with, I think we can leave our sort of overview of the Necron Codex, both what we know and what's alleged there. So just to say, I've been Adam, the legal department. You can find me on Instagram at ADR Wargaming.
I'm Ed. You can find me at the Warhipster on Instagram.
I'm Josh, and you can find me at Sandman. No, wait, hang on.
This is a fair trade.
Wait, so hang on. I'll send you my password. You can take over. That's fine. Yeah. I'm confused now. You've thrown me through.
So Ed here cruelly trying to take credit for the beautiful work that Josh has done. So Ed, what is your real Instagram handle?
I am the Sandman Hobby on Instagram.
Cool. And Josh, of course.
Yeah, I'm Warhipster on Instagram and YouTube and Ko-Fi and Patreon. And a website coming soon. So many things. Allegedly, it's coming very, very soon.
So there you go, guys. If you wanna see more of what we do, check us out. We are actually also on Instagram as the podcast as well now. We're at the Conclave 40k podcast. So check us out on there. We'll be posting more about new episodes and various projects that we're working on as we go along. So thank you very much for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you again next time.